much a part of life it is, but a particular part of the career that we've all chosen. It is right next to us, hip joint at the hip. It's occurred to me that there are two things that we all avoid like the plague in life, and that is death and failure. And some of us avoid failure almost as much as we avoid death. And by that I mean by not trying or not doing the things we need to do to succeed. And we think that we can avoid it. At some point, I mean, somewhere deep down inside we say, well, if I don't do that, then I won't fail. Well, yeah, you won't. You won't ever accomplish anything either. And we think it's something that is avoidable, number one. But what I've been trying to do by reading the stories of famous people, I'm intrigued by that. Every time I admire somebody or I read a biography of somebody, I find out that they've failed miserably or they've gone through incredible hardship, and you go, that's just like what I've gone through, or I guess I'm not alone as well. But believe me, you scratch any successful person and they will be, first thing they'll tell you about is, yeah, well, it wasn't always that way. I failed, okay? And I think it's a good thing for us to discuss and talk about because, again, death is something we definitely want to avoid as long as we can. We all know we're going there, but not without a struggle and not for a while. As far as failure goes, I think we have to learn how to embrace it and how to look at it in a different way. It's a measurement of how we progress, okay? And it comes at the cost, or rather it is the cost for success. One person put it that it was the condiment that gives success its flavor. And it is true, because the sweeter, the worse the failure, the sweeter the success. It's a wonderful thing. Almost a matter of fact, if there was no failure, it wouldn't taste as sweet when you do finally make it there. We talked about Oprah and how she had failed. We talked about Steven Spielberg. The one that I've brought up several times in class was Thomas Edison, and I don't even understand how this is possible. But he did basically 1,000 experiments before he created his successful light bulb. And they interviewed and asked him, they said, well, weren't you discouraged? I mean, with so many failures? He said, I never looked at them as failures. He said, I just looked at them as 999 ways not to make a light bulb. And that was his attitude. And he loved what he was doing. And that's the other thing. If you love what you're doing and you're passionate about it, you're going to do it anyway. And you just adjust, right? This failure, I'm going to do this different. Or I'm going to go get this. I thought, and I've always wanted to do this since I was a kid. So when I got to Hollywood, I thought, I'm going to go out for musicals, right? I played a little guitar, and I was singing along, and I thought, all right, it's all right. So I went to this audition for Disney. This is a true fucking story. And it's in this church. They had a weird thing in the basement of the church, big cavernous thing, concrete floor, and there's a piano. And I mean, okay, so the door would be there. The piano would have been beyond that, all the way down on that room, and there's this long conference table with a bunch of people behind it. And then, and the walkway must have been 100 feet just to get to the thing, right? And I'm carrying my guitar. And I'm sitting down getting ready to play, and the lady goes, we have to hear you with the piano. And I go, dope, right? And I have music and everything. I went, oh, okay. So I get the music, and I walk all the way over to the piano player, and I lay it, I have it all taped up, it's like recording. The guy looks at me, I just gave him the music. And I go, and they're all looking at me. And the piano player starts. And the first thing that shoots through my mind is, I don't recognize that song at all. So what are, and there's a guy on the other side of the table. I see him do like this with his head on the table. He just puts his head on the table, and the other guy looks over here like this, and the woman is just staring at me. And now, the song is over, and so's my life. At that point, that's what I'm thinking. I cannot even tell you, because I can't remember how small and humiliated I felt. And now I have to go all the way over to the piano and get my music and walk all the way, pack the shit up, and they can't wait for me to get the fuck out of the room, right? And I've got my guitar in hand, and I said, and I don't know what to do. I'm fucking dying inside, right? But I said, I learned something. And the lady actually looked at me with interest and said, yeah, what's that? And she really wanted to know. I said, next time I do this, I'm going to have my audition material prepared. And she said, good for you. I go outside, I go outside the door and burst into fucking tears. I mean, not just, I mean, snot, the whole, I never felt so humiliated in my life. And about 10 seconds later, I start laughing hysterically, because I'm trying to visualize what it must have been to look at this asshole up there fucking up this audition right, left, and center. And right then and there, I vowed, I'm going to go get singing lessons. And I did. And I went through a couple of teachers. I found a wonderful guy who tried, and I will never be like a professional singer, but I can sing, and I can go out on musical auditions, and I know how to prepare rehearsal, and I know how to prepare music, and I know what to give them. I know they're gonna, they can hear 4 bars, let alone 16, and know they're gonna hire you or not, but I know how to do it. So failure was my teacher, and he was hard, or she. It was awful. Would I repeat that? I wouldn't do that. I would actually let somebody stab me before I would ever fucking do that again. It killed me. But it was necessary, because I didn't know, right? And this is what we do. In order to learn, you must be willing to fail. And I was willing to do anything. I said, okay, if this is what it takes, this is what I'm gonna do. And every single person that has succeeded in this world has had some of those moments. And I wanna give you a couple more of them. Can you imagine your childhood without Walt Disney? It could have easily been if Walt had listened to his former newspaper editor, who told him that he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Walt went on to create the cultural icon that bears his name. Disney's take on failure was, I think it's important to have a good hard failure when you're young, because it makes you kind of aware of what can happen to you. I've never had any fear in my whole life when we've been near collapse and all of that. I've never been afraid. And I can reiterate that. There's another story I'll tell you later, and I want to expand on it. But again, we all go through those things. All we see right now is the result of successful people, and we think, oh wow, what? They were super talented, or they're super lucky, or they were super whatever. But we don't understand the pain and sweat and tears that went into it. Another one, and this is the last one for tonight. Albert Einstein, father of relativity. His name is synonymous with intelligence. Who are you, Einstein? Right? It's a joke. And yet it wasn't always that way for Albert Einstein. As a child, he didn't start speaking until he was 4 years old. Can you imagine his mother and father? I mean, that's a big deal, okay? He didn't read until he was 7, and he was thought to be mentally handicapped. It was just different. He thought differently. His mind worked differently. He went on to win a Nobel Prize and altered the world's approach to physics. I guess he was just thinking of the right thing to say for those first 4 years. There'll be more of them. I think it's important. It makes me feel better reading them to you. I like to keep these things in mind, because when I was on my path, and where a lot of you are, building my resume, starting my career, going through the same BS, I had to remember to take time to read this kind of stuff and to put this in my mind, that the path I'm on is the right path, and failure is supposed to be there. The only thing that I've got to do is get my mind around that and not let it deter me or affect me in a way that can hinder my progress. So I like to give you these little bon mots, and I hope it makes you feel better as it makes me. Thanks for listening.